A doctor just blew the lid off the protein industry, calling it a scam. But how deep does the deception go? Let's find out the truth. Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman. Welcome to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. In this video, which is a reacts video to a reacts video, we're going to hear from Dr. Brad Stanfield as he talks about protein. And again, we're going to learn about using research, the context that the research was done, whether it applies to you or me or us generally. And then can things change over time as new paradigms occur, new paradigms evolve? So please watch till the end where you get my final thoughts. Before I dive into today's video, I want to let you know about something special. Enrollment is now open for my online course, Keto Made Simple. If you've ever struggled with keto because it felt too complicated or you weren't sure if you were doing it right, this course was made for you. I'll walk you through exactly what works, step by step, with no gimmicks, no guesswork, and no complicated tracking. You'll also get live Q&A sessions with me and my team, plus 3 weeks of support, so you'll never be on this journey alone. Enrollment is open until October 27, and I'd love to see you inside. You can find the link right below this video. Now, let's get to today's video.
The current recommendation of 0.8 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day is kind of a joke. We need to be closer to 2 grams per kilo of body weight per day.
We basically tell people aim for 1 gram per pound, which would be 2.2 grams per kilo. I'm sort of targeting, somewhere between 150 and 180 grams of protein per day.
The RDA for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. The RDA for protein is too low.
Yeah, so these days we're constantly hearing about the need for more protein, and it's a trend driven by some of the biggest health influencers that you've just seen on the screen. And there is something to their arguments, as we'll see, but this trend is also driving a shift in eating habits that threatens to make us fatter and wreck our health. And the fault of all of this lies at the feet of the big food industry, aka big food. But first, before we get onto that, doesn't a higher protein intake have a lot of proven benefits?
Well, thanks for sending me the video to react to. Dr. Brad is, I think, an excellent reviewer of the medical literature, and depending on the clinical experience that a doctor has, will have a certain either clinical intuition that balances out with what the research shows, or the clinical experience might not bear that out. And some doctor influencers aren't in the clinic at all, but you want to be careful of those people. But the idea of how much protein to have, we're made of protein. If you come to my office and I do a body composition analysis on you, every weight loss program does that pretty much, you'll find that you're mainly water, protein, and fat. The protein being the muscle, bones, that sort of thing. So we're not made of sugar. We're made of protein. And that's the language we use, where protein comes first, protein forward. Protein, if there's one thing to eat, it's protein. No question about that. Now, how much is the question?
Well, yes, but simply pushing for higher protein can be very misleading, and here's why. The basic argument for higher protein goes something like this. The current recommended daily allowance for protein intake is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, but depending on your goals, that recommendation might be too low.
So the recommended daily allowance, or the daily recommended intake, these are, committees that get together and come up with their best possible guidance, that they have expert opinion. And if you're used to talking to, or listening to me, we talk about a ladder of clinical evidence, a hierarchy of clinical evidence, and expert opinion is really one of the lowest on this level of evidence ladder, if you will, because generally it's not based on a lot of science. It's based on expert opinion. Rather, we'd have, 10, 20 randomized controlled trials under all sorts of circumstances. Are you young? Are you old? Do you exercise? Are you trying to maintain? So in just the influencers we saw so far, all of them were lean. They were talking about we or I, and in their experience, they were generally young. And what if you can't exercise? What if your knee pain is so bad? What if you're 70 years old and you're just not hungry? Well, these are other situations that I don't think we're going to find a lot of guidance on.
Because we need more than that to optimally build and preserve muscle, and a high protein intake, it also helps us to lose weight via at least two mechanisms. So it boosts the feeling of feeling full after a meal, and our bodies also burn more energy processing proteins than either carbs or fats. But should we really boost our protein intakes all the way up to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day?
Well, of course, remember some of them said lean body mass, it said per body weight. If you come to my office and your BMI is 35, normal, or the best one between 20 and 25, if you will, then you're carrying a lot of fat on your body, and they're not targeting the protein amount based on your weight at that moment. So the more accurate way would be to gauge the protein per the lean body mass, and that can be calculated on one of a number of calculators online or by a machine in my office. So actually, when we talk, yes, you need protein. How much protein, we're not sure. Now we're talking about matching the protein to the amount of lean body mass, which makes sense. If you're a larger person, you probably need or would want to take in more protein. Kind of makes sense.
Well, here's what the data that we have actually says. So for muscle building, there was an influential meta-analysis published in 2017, and it looked at the effects of protein supplements on muscle gains during resistance training, and it found that increasing protein intake led to greater muscle gains from exercise, but only up until a point. After about 1.62 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, there didn't appear to be any further benefits. But a newer meta-analysis adds some important nuance to those earlier findings, and it uncovered a significant inflection point at around the 1.3 gram per kilogram of body weight per day mark. So up until that point, increasing protein intake, it did have a large impact in terms of increasing lean body mass.
Well, and this is in the context of otherwise healthy people. If you're watching, you're one of my patients, or you're just interested in weight loss or diabetes reversal, there are these competing treatments now. We've always had lifestyle, diet mainly is what I use, but now there are these GLP-1, GIP agonists, these the shots for weight loss. Well, one of the things that wasn't really fully appreciated is that if you lose a lot of weight on one of these shots and you're not eating protein, and if you're not doing resistance training to hold on to your protein when you eat it, you can lose a lot of muscle mass. And so my public service announcement, if you're on one of these weight loss shots, make sure you're eating protein. Again, you'll hear, spoiler alert, I don't know how much to advise. Everyone else kind of is certain about the amount of protein per day, but you'll want to prioritize protein, especially if you're on a weight loss shot.
But are there any harms for extremely high protein intake diets? Well, there are two important worries that we need to take a look at. The first one is about kidney health. So for a long time, there's been concerns about high protein diets straining the kidneys, and the current guidelines suggest avoiding high protein intakes for those with chronic kidney disease. And the reason is this: when our bodies break down proteins, our kidneys have to filter out the resulting waste products. And when we eat a lot of protein, they have to work harder. This workload can cause the delicate structures that do the filtering to swell, and over time, that can lead to damage. And those damaged filter structures can let protein leak into the urine. And there is evidence that aiming for lower protein intake levels that the guidelines recommends helps. It appears to slow the progression of kidney disease and improve markers of kidney function in those with advanced stages of this condition. And there are some long-term observational studies that found an association between higher protein intakes and higher risks of developing kidney disease. So for instance, one study followed up about 1,800 adults for a 6-year follow-up period. They assessed protein intake and they also tested kidney function. So those in the highest third in terms of protein intake had about a 50% higher risk of developing kidney disease than those with the lowest third. Yet a recent study, just to balance out the arguments here, found that higher protein intakes in patients with mild to moderate kidney disease actually reduced mortality significantly. And remarkably, those with daily protein intakes of about 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day had a 33% lower mortality risk than those getting 0.8 grams. So the researchers concluded in this study that the benefits of protein intake outweighed any risks, and this is true even for many with kidney disease.
I think the main variable here, or two variables, is the amount of carbs being eaten at the same time as the protein change, and also whether you're losing weight or not, or reversing a disease like type 2 diabetes that causes kidney trouble on its own. So countering these papers, which, it's been kind of a taboo to study and recommend protein for those with kidney trouble. Taboo meaning there's not a whole lot of science to say that it's bad, but we just don't study it because we all know it's bad. There was a similar type of taboo with a low carb, high fat diet 25 years ago when we got into this. There were no studies to say that it was bad, but everyone knew it was bad and no one would study it. So same with kidney function and protein in the diet. If you're doing a low carb diet and you're reversing diabetes or metabolic syndrome, actually know that kidneys don't get worse. And there are a couple studies now, the Verta study, the diabetes reversal study, the company out of Silicon Valley, and then the studies from our group and also Dr. Unwin's group, our clinical series of people on low carb diets, and the kidney function did not deteriorate. So here we're talking about theory about the protein being filtered and the swelling, which really didn't pan out in the clinical setting, I'm afraid. So yet this is a common sort of taboo that someone might do a high protein diet. But when I coach my patients, I say, don't say you're doing a high protein diet. It's really not. It's really a high fat diet. But because no one wants to hear that either, I coach my patients to say that it's a modified Mediterranean diet. And then everyone says, well, that's great for you.
So the evidence here suggests that a higher protein intake, around about 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, is probably safe and even beneficial, even including those that have mild forms of chronic kidney disease. But neither do we want...
Yeah, well, I'm glad he's reassuring there, because you want to also consider if you're reversing diabetes, you're reversing hypertension, both of these things cause kidney damage, and you're reversing them. If in the short run there's a little bit of protein extra in the food, or even the cholesterol goes up a little bit, those are fine. Those are kind of minor distractions. You want to reverse these major conditions: obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and you won't get worsening kidney function, best we can tell, because you're also fixing those things.
The source of protein that we're eating matters a lot, and it's actually this area where I've got the biggest concerns with the current protein obsession. I'm talking about what big food has done. They've hijacked the push for more protein to start selling more ultra-processed foods, and they label them as high protein. The amount of high protein products available to consumers worldwide has quadrupled in the last decade. Sticking this description on the label, it creates what's called a health halo effect. So this is where our perception of a food's healthfulness is influenced heavily by a single attribute. So in the past, this was often true for foods that were marketed as low fat, and today, it's high protein. But are the high protein products that are now crowding out the shelves on local supermarkets actually healthy? Well, in an in-depth study of foods that were claiming to be high protein in Spain, set out to answer this question. According to a rigorous model for rating food quality, almost 91% of high protein products were classified as less healthy. Specifically, more than 50% were high in fat or sodium. Around 1 in 4 were high in sugar or saturated fat, and incredibly, a larger share of foods labeled as higher protein earned the label of less healthy than those without this marking. And unfortunately, this isn't just a Spanish problem, as consumers were trying to hit protein intake levels and were reaching for those new, higher protein packed snacks to help us get there. But to do that, we can...
Well, it's fascinating to see how the food industry will try to take advantage of, or is it just common business practice to just use a word that's popular? And keto products you could see in a similar way. I don't recommend them. They're generally lower in carbs and still have the other sorts of ultra-processed stuff in them, so I'm not a big fan of them. But the idea that the protein label is misused, I'm not doubting that at all. So you want to be careful with what you purchase, of course, with anything in a bag or a box, and try to eat real food as best you can. And yet people have a desire for convenience. So you have to figure out a way to get the food in a convenient way.
Snickers now has a high-protein version of the classic candy bar. It contains 20 grams of protein. Now, compared to the original, it's definitely an improvement, but it still has 5 grams of saturated fat, 150 milligrams of sodium, and 4 grams of sugar. Or there's Cookies and Cream Cheerios Protein. It's got 8 grams of protein per serving, but it's also got 210 milligrams of sodium.
Wait, that was a pretty low carbohydrate level. I'm not so worried about the fat and the salt, as you know. These seem like they're going in the right direction, these products.
So we need to dig deeper and understand exactly how ultra-processed foods.
Well, my take-home point is carbs. So these ultra-processed food have carbs, which is an important point. If you're one of my patients, you're watching this, processed meats like bologna and salami, things on the shelf, these are not ultra-processed food as defined by these, well, in my view, because they don't have the same carb levels. So that is a problem with the ambiguous term ultra-processed. There's really no one definition for it. The classic rebuttal is, well, if you have a apple pie at home that your grandma makes, it's from real apples and flour, that's not ultra-processed. But if you go to McDonald's or a fast food place and get an apple pie, suddenly that's an ultra-processed food. So the apple pie from home is as healthy as the apple pie, is healthier than the one at the fast food. So no, there's still a lot of carbs. I'm afraid if there's just a focus on reducing ultra-processed foods without regard to sugar, starches, there really won't be a big change in the public health with that kind of change.
So, for example, I'd love to see more funding for researchers like Dr. Kevin Hall in his metabolic ward studies so that we can figure out.
Well, that's an interesting idea, but no one has done a study telling people over, let's say 100 people, don't eat ultra-processed foods, and then follow them over 6 months, see what happens to their health, the weight, diabetes, that sort of thing. So the messaging about how to tell people what to do is missing totally. So the idea that you can go from a metabolic ward study, which Professor Hall did, you got a lot of attention, to then do a public policy like this is as leaping and is not as logical. Well, so going from the metabolic ward studies that were done on ultra-processed food to messaging to the public is about as logical as taking the food pyramid, which was a construct on let's lower the fat because fat has the most calories, and put that out into the general population without any research. So I'd like to see a study of 50 to 100 people being told to change from ultra-processed food and see what happens to their health. That study has never been done. Now, the low-carb messaging, we published our first paper in 2002. And if you have the messaging of do a low-carb diet, and here's what carbs are, here's how you lower them, this has been shown over and over and over to be a healthy thing to do. And the research on ultra-processed diets, meaning randomized trials, prospective studies, just haven't been done.
Now, in terms of our protein requirements, again, I aim for 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight per day. And the best way to figure out your ideal body weight is to go and use mdcalc.com. It's got an ideal body weight calculator and it's based on your height. Then multiply the answer by 1.2 and that is the protein.
Well, I think that's a good guideline to go by. But do we really need guidelines? If you're coming to my clinic to reverse diabetes, metabolic syndrome, or even just asking for general health advice, rather than calculate your protein need and have you worry about your ideal body weight and protein 1.2, do you have to do that every day? Really? Do you have to have it proportioned twice a day, 3 times? No, I think the body has more wisdom than that. And I instruct people to follow what their body signals tell them. Of course, there's things that thwart the body signals in a clinic like mine with prednisone and insulin and gabapentin and nasal sprays with steroids and all of these other signals. But I don't think you need to calculate this. And I don't think we know the exact amount you need per day. Well, again, a good video, and I think the intended audience is someone like him, young, fit. I see a patient population who are not necessarily young nor fit and have a dozen medications that I have to help people deprescribe to get off of as they start feeling better and the metabolism is improved, without even telling people the amount of protein to have every day, without even using a app or a Fitbit or a body biohacking tool. So this is one way to go about it. That's another way to go about it. Again, the new idea of autophagy, which is not really new, but it's bubbling up to be new, like a general knowledge for folks of the body actually healing when you don't eat so much, lends into the idea of fasting, meaning a period of time when you're not eating, so your body can clean itself up a bit. The idea of eating less is a healthy thing, not more. You actually lose weight by eating less, not more. I know the context matters for all of these different things. And so when you're trying to figure out from influencers and even from what I say, if it applies to you, consider whether you're otherwise healthy, you're young, you're not healthy, you're on medications, you have other medical issues. I know it can be quite complicated, and that's why I choose to have a simple teaching approach. If you like this, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and look out for new content on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our YouTube membership for early access and exclusive live Q&As with me. Just click the join button below or support us with a PayPal in the description.